Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. And I am joined here, as always, by the man who, after watching the Red Sox for about 20 games, is saying, you know what, maybe the coronavirus canceling the MLB season, not the worst thing in the world. It is Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing?
Yeah, it's been a difficult Red Sox season, but the Bruins are up 2-1. They're still struggling a little bit against the team. I think they're way better than in Carolina. But yeah, the Red Sox season is just about over for me. So, baseball's over.
Yeah, I mean, that must be tough. Having your hockey team struggle against a team, they're way better than in round one. Can't relate as a Lightning fan. But we will, before we get too much into this, just should mention, if you listen to the last episode on YouTube, you probably noticed there were a lot of ads. That was not intentional. I guess I forgot to enter in manually the ads on it. And typically in the past, that has just meant no ads. Last week, I guess it's now become like if you don't enter it in, it becomes automatically, YouTube automatically puts them on, and they put one on every 3 minutes. So that was probably very annoying for some of you. So apologies about that. The bright side, though, is that our audio only feed went up last week. So we got that going for us. But yeah, and again, if it ever happens again, just tweet at me at Jackson Kruger. Let me know what's going on. I'll be sure to fix it. But anyways, today should be a fun show. We have the AFC North preview, which should be interesting. And we're also doing a draft of the NBA playoffs. So NBA playoff teams, we're going to do a draft. We're going to pick, I think we'll just do, we'll get a total of 12 teams, I think. We'll each pick 6. We don't need to go full out. I want to leave some undrafted. I think that'll be fun. So we'll do that. And let's just start off with that. And then we will get into the AFC North breakdown, which I'm sure most of you are here to see. But let's just do that. And Kyle, I have an idea for how we can do who gets the first pick and who gets the next pick. The way we're going to do this is that one of us gets the first pick, the second person gets the second and third, but then we're just going to alternate. So we're not doing snake draft all the way around. We're just doing it for the first one. I'm going to write a number down, 1 or 2, on this napkin I have in front of me, okay? And then you guess a number 1 or 2. And then if you guess it correctly, then you get to choose which one you want, either first pick or second and third. If you guess it incorrectly, then I get to choose. Okay,
All
so
right.
1 or 2. What do you get? What do you think?
2.
Incorrect. That is a 1 on the napkin. I faked you out. I wrote like a 2, and then I wrote a 1 right next to it. High IQ by me. So I think I will go second here. I want the second and third. I will give you the first pick.
I didn't think you were going to take my team first. So I'm going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks first. I think they're going to win the title. They've been the best team the entire season, and I think that continues. Yes, they were 3-5 in the bubble, but I don't think they really cared because it didn't take much for them to clinch the number 1 seed. I think that Giannis is still the best player on the planet, and when he's going downhill, I think he's the most unstoppable player in the paint that the NBA has ever seen.
Well, yeah, because he can just run straight into people, and they'll call the foul on them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think his range is insane. His stretch, his what's it called? His steps are insane. I just think he's the most unstoppable player in the paint. His spin move is almost unfair. And then I think Chris Middleton continues to be an underrated number 2. He's just got such a silky smooth mid-range game. So I'm going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're going to win the title. I'll take them first.
Yeah, I don't hate this pick. I think that especially with them playing in the East, I think if I had to pick a number 1 pick, I probably would have gone with Milwaukee actually. But I would have. I felt like I don't feel strong enough about them. I think getting to 2 and 3 has more value than just the 1. And with the 2 and 3, several ways I could go here. I'm just going to go. I'll do them both at once. I'm going to do both LA teams right here. I think that these are the 2 teams that are probably the best in the West. I think that it's fair to say they both had their struggles since entering the bubble. But I also do think that the chances seem very likely that one of these 2 teams is going to come out of the West. And I actually do think that I like either one of these 2 teams one-on-one against Milwaukee pretty good. So because they both have some of, big guys who can potentially defend Giannis. I think especially the Clippers. I feel like their team just kind of could actually have a chance against him. And I think that they're a better overall team. I think the 2 LA teams are going to be here at second and third.
Yeah, so I mean, at the beginning of the season, I had Clippers and Bucks for the NBA title. I still kind of feel like that's the case. The issue I didn't pick the Clippers or the Lakers was I still have too many questions about their team. The Clippers have a lot to do with consistency. They seem to not care a lot of games. Now, obviously, that can flip during the playoffs, but how easy is it to flip that switch necessarily is my question. I do think that they're going to make the final still because Kawhi and Paul George are just too good, specifically Kawhi. The Lakers, my biggest question is guard play. Who? I don't know. So even in the first round, the Blazers have a monumental advantage at guard. Dame Lillard to CJ McCollum compared to Alex Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope.
It depends on are you counting LeBron James as the guard?
Well,
I think it's what it comes down to.
LeBron is the guard, but he's still playing usually with KCP and KCP and Caruso in the lineup, or Dion Waiters or J.R. Smith are usually out there. They're not going to ask CJ or Dame to guard LeBron by any means. But on the other side, that's a huge advantage for those guys, especially if they miss a shot. Having to switch back in terms of getting LeBron on a Dame is just going to be a tough ask. But I still think the Lakers get through that series pretty easily at the end because they have too much size that Nurkic almost becomes a non-factor. But overall, I just think that the Clippers are a better team. I still like Kawhi and Paul George to beat out LeBron in a 7-game series. I think AD is terrific, but he hasn't really shown it in fourth quarters of these big games. Probably too controversial of a take, but I still think it kind of holds true until he actually does it, which is almost unfair, but I also think fair at the same time. So that means I get 4 and 5 though, right?
No, you get 4, then I get 5, and we go back like that.
Okay, so we're going back to normal. Oh man. This is another team I have two teams that I have too many questions about. I guess I'll keep it chalk so far. I'm going to go with the Raptors with this one.
Okay.
I just think that they've probably been one of the more impressive teams of the bubble. They continue to just look fantastic in their title defense minus Kawhi. I think Kyle Lowry's been sensational. I think Fred VanVleet's been sensational on a contract year, which is pretty insane. Pascal Siakam has been really good as well. I think everybody in Toronto's just played really well. My issue with Toronto from the entire season, even though they've played well, because this was a team that a lot of people were projecting to regress, is that I've never seen a team with their best player being Kyle Lowry's level win an NBA title. And I still think that's going to hold true, that they're not going to win an NBA title, because I just don't think you can win with Kyle Lowry being your best player on a title team. I just think that's the fact to it. I think this is going to be a good team. I think that they could make the Eastern Conference Finals, but I don't think they get past Milwaukee because of that, even though they have the best coach in the league in Nick Nurse, who was essentially snubbed from a Coach of the Year finalist. He's just so far better than everybody else. But I'll take the Raptors here. I think they beat Boston in the second round.
Yeah, no, I like Toronto as well. And it does seem like if Milwaukee somehow stumbles, like let's just say Giannis gets hurt, I do think that they all of a sudden do kind of emerge as that number 1 team in the East. So I think that makes sense. But the way I'm going to pick my next pick is, again, I'm looking at this as who has the best chance of winning the NBA Finals. That's all that matters. The goal in this draft is to pick who wins the NBA Finals. And I think the team that has the biggest slice of that pie is the Houston Rockets. I think that they need things to go their way. But I think that this is a team that can, if enough ifs come true, that they can end up winning it. I do think that I hate their matchup against the Clippers, but I think that they could give the Lakers trouble. And if someone else can knock out the Clippers, they might have a chance to get through the West and win it all. It's them, but at this point, there's no team that I feel like has a great chance of winning a title. I think this one is the one with the best. Kyle, tell me why I am stupid and wrong.
Should I just transition to my next pick because this works out perfectly?
Sure.
I'm going to go with Oklahoma City Thunder because I think they're going to beat Houston in the first round. I think that the one thing, if you look at matchups, I don't think that this is a great matchup for Houston for the first 2 rounds that they may possibly face, because the whole benefit to having PJ Tucker playing center is that he's strong enough to essentially box out other centers and keep them off the block. Well, he's not stronger than Steven Adams. I think Steven Adams is going to eat the Rockets alive in the first round rebounding, and that's just going to cause a problem if every miss that the Thunder have is going to Steven Adams. I think that's a bad matchup for the Rockets, and I think that the Thunder have been very frisky throughout this bubble format, and I think that guys like Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander match up really well defensively for Houston. You're not going to stop Russell Westbrook and James Harden, but I think if I'm going to bet on two guys to contain them as well as possible, it's going to be those two guys who are both very good defenders. So I'm going to go with the Thunder to not only beat the Rockets in the first round, but I think they're a sleeper and possibly the third best team in the West.
Wow. Well, no, I like the Thunder a lot too. I don't totally agree about the Steven Adams point. I don't know how well he's going to defend the perimeter on the other side, and I think that's important. Because again, I think that clearly the Rockets say if you want to put a center out there who's really good at scoring in the paint, you keep doing that, and we'll just keep shooting threes, and threes are worth more than two. I think that, but yeah, I don't know. I think what's really going to come down to this series is Russell Westbrook's injury. And is he gone for 2 games? Is he gone for the whole series? I think that could be make or break. I think either of these teams could win this first round. I think either of these teams could find a way to sneak into the finals. I think they're both sneaky here. I'll go with another team right here. I think I got to go with the Celtics. I think the Celtics are going to be my next pick. Again, they're kind of that another one of those teams. It's a lot about like, do you believe that Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker can be guys who can lead them to a finals? They have one of the best coaches in the league. I don't know if I'm like super high on them, but again, they're playing in a much weaker East. I think they have a chance to, if Giannis does go down, they might have a chance to squeak in there.
Yeah, I debated the Celtics higher just because I do think Tatum's that good. I think he's a future All-Pro, All-NBA first-team player for many years to come. The 2 issues I have with the Celtics is the habitual knee problems of Kemba Walker, which didn't go away over the 2-month hiatus for the NBA, which I think is a problem. If you have 2 months off and come back and your knee's still bothering you to going into the bubble, I think that this playoff stretch is going to be tough. I think they beat Philly because I think Philly is a mess, obviously without Ben Simmons too. But I don't like Daniel Theis against Toronto. I think that's going to be a major problem going into that second round. I think that I still think size matters in the NBA. And I think that Toronto is going to be able to eat them alive on the boards. And I think Toronto is going to be able to hit enough shots to beat them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Go on to your next pick now.
All right, so I have 3 teams I'm debating here. Going back and forth. I guess I'll go Denver here. If I'm going between these 3 teams, I got to pick Denver. I still think Jokic is underrated. He didn't make an MVP finalist, which I thought was a little harsh because he's been terrific this year. And I think they're going to be very good, but I think this is a team that should be more excited about the years to come, especially because Michael Porter Jr. and Bol Bol have both shown flashes of they're both going to be really good. It's going to be insane watching. This team's almost bucking the trend of everybody else because they have Michael Porter Jr., who's 6'10", Bol Bol, who's 7 foot, and then Jokic, who's also 7'1", 7'2" as well. They're essentially going to play 3 giants going forward, and I'm incredibly excited to see how this works out because Bol Bol and Porter Jr. and Jokic can all hit the 3. How the space on this team works of all guys who are just gigantic. I think this is going to be a really good team for years to come, but I think they're also a team that's also going to be competitive. I think they've always been competitive for the last 5 years. They've proven that they can be a really good team. Do they get out of the second round? Probably not, but I do think that they're a team that can cause some problems, and Jokic can steal a game against the Clippers, no doubt.
Yeah. I think that's I like the Nuggets a lot. I just don't like that they're in the West. I think that it's going to be too hard for them to get out of that. So I'm going to pick a team in the East here. I'm going to go with Miami. I think the Heat. I think that they have. I think it's interesting where it's like I think it's fun with Jimmy Butler playing against the Pacers again, where he had that moment with T.J. Warren. I think it should be a very fun first series. I do think the Heat are that kind of team where I think that they have a very they're a guard heavy team. They have a team with Jimmy Butler. They have a team with Tyler Hero from Kentucky, who had some huge moments in the tournament with Kentucky. I mean, if you want to talk about a guy who is NBA ready as a rookie, I think someone from Kentucky tends to be the way it goes. And I do trust that obviously to have Bam. This is a team with a lot of talent. I think that could potentially be a year away. But I think that this is, again, they're in the East, and I still stand by. It's like, yes, there's the Bucks, but if the Bucks go down, you have sort of the Raptors, Celtics, and Heat. I could see any of those teams finding a way to squeak in there if the big dog does end up falling.
Yeah, I was debating Miami with this one. You said a year away. I feel like they're a person away. They're one guy away, I feel like. Because I feel like it's too much Jimmy Butler for me to really think that this is that they're going to beat the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I think Jimmy Butler's good. Do I think he's the best guy on an Eastern Conference Finals team? Probably not. I feel like this has always been kind of the perfect the Wizards seem like they're going to roll back with Wall and Beal. I feel like this was always the perfect Beal destination. And I still kind of feel that way, but I still feel like they're still a person away, whoever it is. I love Duncan Robinson. I've loved how they've transformed this offense. And I think Spoelstra is a really good coach. I think they've been well coached. I think they do a terrific job. And, I just think that right now with Bam as essentially your number 2 guy, this is the same problem that I think the Jazz have had for a couple of years, that when a big man who's essentially at best a 0 on offense is your number 2 guy, I just think it's tough to make a deep run. I just think that's what it's going to be. And it's the same thing I feel about Gobert, but to an even more extent because they're in the West. It's how I feel about the Heat right now. I still feel like they need another they need another scorer.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why they fell to 9. But I think that at this point, best odds of winning it all still on the board. Who do you have as the number 10? This is your 5th pick, so you have one more pick after this.
Yeah, so I have 2 and you have 1, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not picking Philly. No, they're off. I'm picking Dallas. I'm picking Dallas because, listen, if anybody who's talked to me understands my affinity for Luka Doncic, who's essentially a deity who dribbles a basketball, I think that he's terrific. I think that he does a lot of what Harden does, but I think the offense is more stimulated with him at the top of the key. Everyone seems a lot more engaged than they do in Houston. I think that at 21, we've seen him do things with the basketball that no one's ever done before. I think that with him and Kristaps, who's now finally seems like Kristaps is finally back from his injury and ready to go. He's played at an insane rate. Tim Hardaway Jr. is hitting a lot of threes. Dorian Finney-Smith hits enough threes. Maxi Kleber is continually underrated for how good he is defensively, and he can also pick and pop. They can outscore anybody in the NBA. That's the thing. That's the one reason you'd pick Dallas, is they can outshoot and outscore anybody. Now, they're not going to defend anybody for a 7-game series to be able to win one, because they're just bad defensively right now. And that's going to be their problem going forward. This is another team who I feel like is another guy or 2 possibly away, which it's going to be interesting to see going forward, because right now it's almost like an NFL team who has the quarterback under the rookie contract. They have a superstar under a rookie contract who I think is going to be all first team or second team NBA, depending on how you vote. So how do they build a team around that guy with the all NBA guy on a rookie contract is going to be the big thing for Dallas. But I do feel like that this is a team that could be a title team in the next year or 2, depending on who they add. But yeah, offensively, I'm taking this team all the way. Defensively, I'm probably not. But at 10, I like the odds.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's a good value for a number 10 pick. I'm going to pick someone a team I wanted to make sure I got in this draft with my last pick. Are they the best team? No, but they have the player who has been voted to be the best player in the bubble so far. I'm going to go to Trailblazers here with my number 11 pick. I know that they're an 8 seed. They barely squeaked into the playoffs. But they're here, and I think that Damian Lillard is playing such good basketball right now. Even if the rest of the team around him isn't spectacular, I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. They were hurt for a lot of the year, which is why their seeding is lower. I think you've seen Carmelo has come on and actually become a decent piece for them. He's hitting some clutch threes. I think this is a team that, again, do I love their odds? No, but I do think that Lillard's the kind of guy where when he's playing, you always have a chance to win. And he'll have to pull off a miracle to win a championship this year, where they would have to go through the Lakers round 1 and then probably the Clippers round 2. But you know what? I think that if anyone can do it, it might be Damian Lillard. I'm picking maybe the hottest player in basketball right now. Not the best, but he's playing really good right now with the Trailblazers.
Yeah, I debated this team for 10, and I probably should have picked them. Like I said, the one thing that they have going for them is, even if LeBron matches up on Lillard, CJ McCollum, even with a broken back, has a massive advantage over who he's going against. whether it's Caruso, Deion Waiters, J.R. Smith. If Nurkic can do enough on the boards and down low against some of the guys that the Lakers have for size, I think that can be a huge thing. But I think that the Lakers are desperately missing Avery Bradley, and it's showing. And I don't think the Trailblazers are going to beat them, but that's definitely giving me cause for concern. And I definitely think that the Blazers can steal a couple games. I really like how this team's played. But yeah, I just think that there's too many pieces that I'm like not sold on, that they're not going to do it. And obviously playing the Lakers in the first round is the toughest draw.
Yeah. It would be quite the run if they were able to pull it off. For number 12, so this is your final pick here. Who do you going to make sure you have on your team, and you can brag about it if they end up going on to win the NBA Finals?
Well, they're not going to win the NBA Finals, but I mean they were 6-2 in the playoff or in the bubble. I keep calling it playoffs. In the bubble, they were 6-2. So I'll take Indiana here. Obviously, they had the hot start from TJ Warren, who seemed like he couldn't be stopped at times. But I mean, this team's still solid. They got Malcolm Brogdon, they got Victor Oladipo. This is a team that has played well throughout this tournament, and I think that they can be very good. I think it's a tough draw against Miami, who's so well coached in the first round, but they could steal that and then give Milwaukee some problems. I don't definitely doubt that. I think that they're a good team. They're a well-organized team, and I think they're going to make some noise. I'll take them here at number 12.
Yeah, I actually had the Pacers higher than the Blazers in my original depth rankings that I did. I just went with a heat of the moment Blazers pick. But I do think the Pacers, again, they have that sort of East. If the Bucks go down, they can make something happen. So yeah, fun stuff. Spent a little bit of time extra than I thought we would on that, but I thought it was fun, so I think it works. And now we can just jump into the we'll do the division breakdown now of the AFC North. Kyle, if this is someone's first time watching one of these, let them know how it works.
Yeah, so we each have some very particular algorithms we went through where we picked our best teams or our best divisions and our best players. So it's going to start with me picking the best division. I'm going to rank these. I've ranked these divisions 1 through 8. I'll explain why I had the AFC North where I had them. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to rank the teams I have 4 through 1 in the division. And then Jackson has broken down each player and position group for the team 1 through 10 and given each position group a rating for each team. As we go through the position groups, we'll see how his position ratings and offensive and defensive rankings stack up against my division rankings. So that's what we're going to have here for the AFC North, which I feel like we should have pretty chalk.
Yes. So without further ado, where did you have the AFC North ranked in your overall division rankings?
Yeah, so I had the AFC North third best division in football. They're sitting behind still the NFC West, which is number 1 for me, and the NFC South, which is number 2. I think the Ravens are a Super Bowl contender, and the Browns and Steelers, I have 2 playoff teams potentially out of those 2. I actually think they're both going to make the playoffs, as we'll talk about. And then I have the Bengals rounding it out as a potential first-round pick, who I still think are a bit of a mess. And so we'll get into that, obviously. But I do think that that makes this division, I think, the third best in football because there are 3 playoff teams, I think, in this division.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That seems about right. There's definitely a lot of high scores on this. And so let's get started. And I think I know where this is going. Who is going to be the number 4 team in this rankings?
Yeah, so I mean, as you just heard in the group, I think that the Bengals are easily still the 4th best team in this division. That's no really surprise to anybody. I think it's interesting. This is the most radical the Bengals have been in like 20 years. They're firing head coaches. They're replacing quarterbacks. They're signing free agents for a change. It's a whole new look out of the Cincinnati Bengals. But I still think it's a couple years away from actually being a competitive Cincinnati Bengals. They still have too many problems to me, which includes probably the worst offensive line in football. I mean, as we'll talk about, a coach I don't really think is qualified to be a head coach. I think there's too many problems with this team that are going to be a holdup overall, but we'll see what happens. I still have the Bengals clearly at 4th and a potential first-round or number 1 pick.
Yeah, I think that the Bengals have some real problems, and the problems are the most important things, I think, for this year, where Zach Taylor, he's getting a 1. I mean, he only had 1 year as a head coach, and he led his team to the worst record in football. Again, he could turn it around, but from what we've seen, you can't give him higher than a 1. Joe Burrow is getting a 2. I should also mention that this is where they ended up in my quarterback rankings. So Burrow was a bottom 6 in terms of quarterbacks for this year because he's a rookie. It's young, and rookies typically for quarterbacks don't play very well their first year. So I'm not expecting much from him. You just kind of hope he shows flashes here. And the offensive line, as you mentioned, I'm actually giving this offensive line a 2. My reasoning for it is that they have Bobby Hart, who is a mess at tackle. They added Xavier Su'a-Filo, I believe is how you pronounce it. He's from Dallas. He's a mediocre, good run, bad pass kind of guy. You have Michael Jordan, not that Michael Jordan, but the guard Michael Jordan, who was he was a 4th-round rookie in 2019 and was not good, but maybe he can turn it around in his second year. But they had, for a center, they had Trey Hopkins, who was a slightly above average starter, and Jonah Williams, who is a first-round tackle. Did not most recent drafted, the one before it, missed an entire season due to injuries. So just because of really Williams, who I think is going to be really good, I'm going to give him a 2. It could easily be a 1. I just think that, they have enough talent to get them a 2. What are your thoughts for those 3 very important positions that the Bengals only get a combined 5 out of 30 potential points for?
All right, so let me start with the offensive line. I think that I'm with you that Jonah Williams could be very good. He was terrific in college. Obviously, the injury hurts, so we'll see, but I think he is going to be very good, which doesn't bring up the rest of the offensive line, which I think since Andrew Whitworth has left has been sort of a bumbling mess for the most part. So I do think that it's going to be it's going to be a huge problem for them. If you can't block for your rookie quarterback, you're not going very far, I think, in the NFL. And then as far the quarterback was weird last year. I thought they kind of benched Andy Dalton to tank to more or less. I think Dalton was better than a 2-14 record, and clearly better than Ryan Finley. So bringing in Burrow, I think that there's nowhere to go but up at that position based on how they performed last year. But he has nobody to block for him, which I think is going to be a problem. Even if Williams pans out, he still has 4 guys who I think are negatives on the offensive line. So I feel like that this is going to be a perfect Penny Sewell draft pick. As we get close to the NFL draft, we'll talk more about these guys. I think Sewell is going to be a terrific offensive lineman who they're going to desperately need. And I don't know, does Zach Taylor last pass this season? I mean, if this team's a top 5 pick,
it's Cincinnati, so
yeah,
they got that going for it. So he probably got another 14. So
yeah, I mean, if this team's a top 5 pick again, I mean, the running joke amongst all the media groups was that he had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay, so he got hired as a head coach. Now, I didn't see enough out of him that really said this guy's an offensive genius by any means, but if he gets a new quarterback in there and things change, maybe he sticks around. But I just think there's too many problems right now and I'm not really convinced he's a very good coach. So I kind of agree with everything you just said there.
Yeah, he had that one first week when they almost beat Seattle, and everyone was like, "Here comes Cincinnati." He made John Ross a great player. Look at what what Zach Taylor was able to do. Since then, not much. Well, let's talk about receivers. Well, on the topic of John Ross, although he had an awful injury, so I don't know what to make of that. But other than him, you have AJ Green, you have Tyler Boyd, you have T. Higgins. I think I'm going to give this a 6. And the reason I'm giving it a 6 is because if everyone is healthy and lives up to their potential, this could be a great receiving core. If AJ Green comes back and is able to, do what he's been able to do in the past, I have a ton of confidence. If Tyler Boyd's able to be that, pretty good number 2 guy, T. Higgins, I think has a ton of potential. But again, it's all potential right now for this receiving group. I can't give it more than a 6. And also for the backs, I'll double up here as well. You have Joe Mixon, who I think is one of the best backs in the game, but he's kind of all they have. You also have Giovanni Bernard as the number 2 guy who looks past his prime. He had just 3.2 yards per carry on 53 carries last year. So I'm going to give it an 8, even though I love Joe Mixon, just because he's kind of all they got. And I think that you do need some backup to get better than, be a 9 or 10. You need to have at least 2 good guys. So 8 and 6 for backs and wide receivers.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were talking about at the time that, Joe Burrow had a lot of skill, a lot of talent coming into this team, which is
Mhm.
not what not a lot of rookie quarterbacks have. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I do think the offensive line brings that down because he's got to have time to throw to these guys. But I think
Mhm.
overall, these two groups are probably two of their strong suits. They have another position group that I think is probably their best. But I do think that this is an elite group in terms of Mixon and AJ Green. He's going to have veterans to rely on in that group to to work the offense around. I do think Mixon's terrific. He's played behind a bad offensive line too, and been very good. AJ Green, I think, will bounce back and be just fine. I'm not sure he's ready to go back to one of the best receivers in football again, but I think he's going to be very good this next season. And I think he's going to be a huge help for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and I'll just finish off the offense here with the tight ends. You have CJ Uzuma. I don't know how Uzomah. He made that name just to make it annoying for me. But in fairness, talking about him for a second, I was actually watching some tape of him the other day. He's looked good as a backup, I would say, but I would like to see him in more of a starting role. He's kind of a question mark just in terms of how good is he going to be as sort of a number one guy with them losing Eifert. They also have Drew Sample, who was a second round 2 years ago. He's kind of a blocking tight end with upside type of guy. So I'm giving the tight end group a 4. It has potential, but we'll have to see how it goes, which brings the offense down to a total of 4.4. I believe that's the third worst offense so far. We still have 4 more teams to go, but third worst offense so far.
Yeah, that's rough, and especially for a guy like Taylor, who's supposed to be an offensive guy, he doesn't have a lot to work with here. So we'll see what happens with this team, but I don't think the offense is going to be very good at least this next season. They could be good in a couple of years based on some of the, they still have talent at wide receiver, Mixon and Burrow. I think that this team could be pretty skilled going forward, but you got to see a lot of the guys pan out before you grade them highly.
Yeah. Also, actually, fourth worst offense. It's Jaguars football team and Bears all lower than him. My notes were weird. So totally different. So I guess we'll just move on to the defense now, because there is one bright spot in this Bengals team, and that's the defensive line. I think that Carlos Dunlap and Sam Hubbard for edge rushers, I think are both solid guys. They're kind of both like 8.5 sack guys, where like if they have a slightly above average year, it'll be a 10 sack guy type of player, which I think is good. Just having 2 of those guys, I'm going to give that group an 8. And for the interior defensive line, you have Geno Atkins and DJ Reader. I mean, this might be one of the best, if not the best, 4-3 interior defensive lines in football. I'm giving this group a 10. So 18 out of 20 points for the defensive line. Easily the best part about this Bengals team.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That interior defensive line I think it's a perfect complement of each other because it's a great run stopper compared to a great pass rusher. Interior wise in Geno Atkins, I think that's going to be a really good group. I'm all for that group. I think they're really talented, and I think they're going to they're going to cause a ton of pressure. Is it going to be enough to bring up the rest of the defense? That was the question.
Yeah, well, we'll get into the rest of the defense. The linebackers that aren't edge, or in this case, linebackers, you have Jermaine Pratt, who was a rookie third rounder in 2019 and wasn't really anything special. You have Josh Bynes, who is a really good player from Baltimore. He's a really good run stopper, not spectacular in coverage, but can do it. And really what he excels at is stopping the run. You also have Logan Wilson, who was a third rounder, and Akeem Davis Gaither, who was a fourth rounder. So a couple of rookies and a sort of unproven player. But they have one good linebacker. Again, this is such a question mark. I think the fact that they do have one guy and then they have a bunch of guys who could potentially come through, I'm going to give this a 5. It definitely has potential to be, a 1. I would say like it could be a 3. It could end up being like an 8. I'm going to give it a 5 right here.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's so many unproven players, not only I think on the linebacking group, but just across the Bengals roster. You're not really sure how to expect a lot of these guys to pan out. The tough thing about Bynes too, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at his injury history, but he hasn't played 16 games since 2015.
Okay.
So if he's a guy that goes down this season, I feel like that could be a major issue, that's going to be a major issue for this team if the one solid linebacker is essentially down by week 8. But yeah, I mean, if he's healthy, then this could be an okay group. But there's just so much unproven players. It's like, how do you grade out these guys?
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately for him, the Bengals stadium was built on an ancient Indian burial ground where players get hurt at the drop of a hat. So that could also be bad for him. We'll move on to the secondary, the final part of this Bengals team. They added Trey Waynes from Minnesota, who's great, and he should miss 2 months from an injury because of that burial ground thing. You also have William Jackson, who I like. I think is a good corner, number one corner. And then but again, so if that's your 1-2 guys, you're thinking, okay, great, but it's not because Waynes is going to be hurt for a good part of the season. So you also have Darius Phillips, who's a third-year player. In his first year, he wasn't really anything special, but his second year, he only played about 100 snaps, but he played well in those snaps. So again, very unproven, but has potential. I think that they were hoping he could just be sort of a third corner and ease him in that way. But now with the Waynes injury, he's kind of getting thrust into a starting corner role. For the safeties, I mean, I like Jesse Bates a lot, and I think Von Bell is a solid starting safety from the Saints. Stayed at 5 times fast. I'm going to give the secondary a 7 here.
Yeah, I think this is a solid group, but I think the Waynes injury is just devastating. I was really excited for him to take over that number 1 role. Losing a guy like that, and then essentially, you have a bunch of guys moving up into roles that they're probably underexperienced for, essentially. William Jackson steps into the number 1 role. I don't think he's ready for that. Darius Phillip moves up in the number 2 role. I don't think he's ready for that. It would have been nice. I think Waynes completes his secondary and probably puts it at an 8 or a 9 for me, but not having him there, I think, is just too much of a miss.
I think I'm probably higher on Jackson than you are as well. Maybe it's the name. But for their so that gives their defense a 7.6, pretty decent defense. Defense not terrible. I think it's their offense of pieces around Joe Burrow that's going to be the real problem. So that gives their total 5.5 for their entire team, which puts them at 23rd out of the 28 total teams. I think this is for Cincinnati fans, don't stress out. This is the rebuilding year. You're going to see what you got. Hope your team wins a few games. Have some fun with it. And then you'll see what you have with this team. You'll get rid of the bad, keep the good, and hopefully replace the bad with good next year and try to be good that way.
Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario for this team is that Joe Burrow wins Rookie of the Year. Because I don't think any best case scenario involves him making the playoffs. And that sounds harsh, but I think at the end of the day, that's realistic, that this team is not going to win 9-10 games. And I just think that's, but that's okay, because I think that they're going in the right direction. Drafting that quarterback's the most important thing. So then the next thing you hope is that it pans out with that quarterback. I think Burrow is going to be really good. He certainly proved himself in his last year at LSU as being a very talented player. Now you just hope that he's closer to that Joe Burrow rather than the Joe Burrow who struggled at Ohio State and LSU those first couple of seasons. But I think he is going to be very good, and I think that this could be a good building block towards the future, obviously, as they continue to add pieces. That offensive line just has to get better. That linebacking group has to get better, and they have to get, once Trey Waynes is healthy, that secondary could be very good, I think. So, once they add those players, I think this team's going in the right direction. It's just you have to be patient as it gets there.
Yeah, I think they have to improve the line. I just think that that's going to be their big key for next year, for next offseason. I just don't think you can win. I don't think you can be a playoff team with a bottom 5 line unless, a bunch of other stuff. I think the Texans did it once, but it's so hard to win that way. But anyways, let's just move on. We'll go to the number 3 team now. Interesting. I feel like I think I know one of 2 teams you're going to go with. I have a guess, but I want to see what you are going to go with here. Who do you have as your number 3 team?
I went back and forth on this one. I felt like this was actually one of the harder predictions of ranking podcast teams, going between these 2 teams, because I feel like Pittsburgh is one injury that happened last season away from being a bad football team again. And I feel like Cleveland, I love all the pieces that they added. I loved everything they did this offseason. But you're still rolling with essentially a lot of the same guys outside of the offensive line and head coach, obviously, which I feel like is 2 big things. I am going to go with the Browns at 3rd. I think they just fall behind. I think Ben stays healthy. I don't think he ends up leading the league in yards, but I think he stays healthy. But I do think that both these teams make the playoffs. I think the Browns did a great job of improving their offensive line. I think that they've done a really good job of essentially getting rid of Freddie Kitchens was obviously the big thing because he was just such a bad head coach. And I it's nowhere to go but up for me for Stefanski, and I really like what he does compared to the players he has on this roster and what he's going to do, I think. I think this offense is going to be really good. I think this defense can be very good. I am going to go with the Browns at third, though. I think they sneak into the playoffs at 9-7, which is a big thing for them. So I'll go with Cleveland here, though.
Yeah, no, I like all three of these teams a lot. Cleveland, one of the better all-around teams. I think I could be wrong with this, but I believe that they have the highest. If you look at their offense and defense, when their lowest score from in between offense or defense, I believe that's still higher than anyone else's lowest score in that. I think they have two very evenly matched teams. I think my concern with Cleveland is right at the top. The two most important positions right now. You have Kevin Stefanski, who, listen, I like the hire when they did it, but we don't know how good he's going to be. He is a rookie head coach. He gets a 3 just because I remember he fell down that far just from being someone who we've never seen before. For quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield got a 2 for how far he fell back. I'm going to give an extra 3. I'm going to give an extra point due to Case Keenum, who I think is a very good backup. So the quarterback room gets a 3 here. My concern, it really is, I didn't love what I saw from Baker Mayfield last year, and I need to see him sort of. He reminds me too much of Jameis Winston. He reminds me too much of this guy who thinks he can make every throw, and he can make so many that it got him to this point with that mindset. And now he has to learn to be sort of a different quarterback in the NFL. And I do think that's the Stefanski style is not going to be to have him be trying to, throw the ball through gaps in coverage and cover 2. Where we've seen him get into trouble and things like that. So I think it's a concern. And again, can he fix it? Yes, but that's my biggest concern right now is will Baker Mayfield be able to sort of, not make as many dumb decisions?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with Stefanski in the coaching position. So I think the interesting thing, so last week we did the hypothetical of what would you grade Patrick Mahomes to show his value over the next best quarterback, which I think we both said 12. If Freddie Kitchens was retained, what would you put him at below 0 to show him as that much worse than the next worst head coach?
That's a good one. I think that Kitchens is getting a bit scapegoated here a little bit. I think there were some more problems last year. I think they've kind of blamed it all on Kitchens. And I actually think that they've improved some of those problems. So there's a real chance that they become good this year. And then it really looks like it was all Kitchens' fault. I think I'd probably give him maybe a 0, maybe a -1. I don't think that I think he was not good. I think what made the Kitchens thing so hilarious was that he clearly wasn't ready for a head coaching job. And for whatever reason, Cleveland turned down Bruce Arians to just hire someone who had never even had a coordinating position before. He was bad. Don't get me wrong. But I think that he's gotten a little bit scapegoated.
That's probably fair. So the Baker thing is interesting. Next Gen definitely did not like him last year. If you look at a lot of the simple stats too, it didn't really like him last year. Completion percentage, he's bottom 4. Quarterback rating, he's bottom 5. If you go plus minus completion percentage to expected completion percentage, he's bottom 7. Interceptions, obviously, he was second. All of these things point to, he was really bad last season. Now, the thing that I think Stefanski is going to be really good is if you looked at a lot of what Minnesota did last year is they essentially simplified everything for Kirk Cousins because it was a lot of Dalvin Cook again. And then, all Kirk Cousins had to do was run and play action and then throw a bomb to Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen. Now you take him over to Cleveland, you go Nick Chubb, and then Baker Mayfield's going to go and play action, and he's going to have Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and Austin Hooper to throw to. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that as far as pass catching options. And I think if you simplify for Mayfield and he plays to his level of his rookie year, which wasn't great, but wasn't bad either, I think. So if he plays like he did as a rookie, I think that this is a playoff team because he just has to make enough throws to make this Browns offense good, which I think he can do.
See, I'm kind of a little bit glad that you brought up the rookie thing because I think his rookie season was a bit overrated because I think that if you go back and watch a lot of his highlights, they were just him taking shots downfield. And again, these high risk, high reward situations, which worked out. And hey, when your team has no expectations and you make some of those throws and you lead your team to a victory, well, then good work. You won a game. But when, the next week you get completely destroyed by the Texans and you throw a pick six to Zach Cunningham and you're just a mess, no one says, oh, wow. People are just like, okay, yeah, they're Browns. They're not very good. And you don't get as much blame as maybe you deserve. I haven't seen it yet from Baker. He's still young, don't get me wrong, but he was drafted a little bit older than some of these other guys. I think it's I have concerns. I'm not saying it's definitely he's going to be a mess, but I have too many concerns about Baker Mayfield right now to feel too confident about Cleveland.
Well, I know this is taking a bit. One more thing, then we'll move on, I guess. I think the one thing, I've kind of felt like all of these quarterbacks from that draft class, if you look back at them, if you look at some of those guys that were taken at the top, it kind of seems like to me that it's turning into these guys can be good with pieces around them, but be bad when it's not very good around them, or if there's a bad offensive line in front of them, all those variables. I think that what the Cleveland Browns have done is built a good team around them where they're not going to ask him to do a whole lot. And if you're not asking Baker to do a whole lot, I think he can put together a solid season, but I just think there's too much talent around him that he's going to be bad. I guess that's one thing I'll see. So
yeah, there's a lot of good talent. I'll just say one more thing and then we'll move off Baker Mayfield. Part of me just wonders if that's going to be a worse thing for him of trying to sort of take the ball out of his hands, if that's going to get him more anxious and more wanting to make plays. But again, at this point, I can't stake our analysis, Baker. All I can do is talk about, what goes on in a football field. Hopefully it works out for him because I think he's so fun to watch. But we'll move on to the offensive line, which is probably the most improved position grouping, maybe out of any position grouping of any team. You got the big ones were obviously signing Jack Conklin and drafting Jedrick Wills. They've gone from poor tackle play to maybe the best run blocking tackle duo in the NFL already. I mean, they've got two guys who can be great at that, and they can certainly pass block as well. J.C. Treader, who is a really good center. Joel Bonito, who's a great pass blocker. So again, bit odd having to pass blocking guard, but he's still good in run as well. And you have Wyatt Teller, who is probably the weak link. He was a third round player who kind of plays like he plays like a third rounder, I would say. But that being said, 4 out of 5 pieces I really like. So I'm giving this an 8. It should be really good, especially for the running game. I think it should help Baker a lot. And this could definitely be a huge positive swing in Cleveland's direction.
Yeah, I mean, we've alluded multiple times to how much they've improved this offseason, and this was pretty much it. I think a lot of people were picking the Browns as kind of a sleeper last year and kind of overlooked a lot of the lack of offensive line play that they had. I think a guy like Chris Hubbard essentially moving into that 6th offensive lineman role is going to be pretty good for him. So I think that this could be a good thing for the Browns, that essentially I don't really think that they have any weakness anymore on the offensive line. They've improved greatly on, especially the tackle plays, like you said. I think this is going to be a really good group. And, especially run blocking for a guy like Chubb, I just think it's going to be insane. I think Chubb leads the league in rushing next year.
I do too.
So, I mean, just based on getting a guy like Stefanski and what he did with Cook and having a really good offensive line in front of him now, I think that this is going to be a great group for him, and I think that's going to be a great group overall.
Yeah, and I'll just finish off the offense right here. We'll just go the last 3 categories. Wide receivers, you got Odell and Jarvis Landry. Great 1-2 punch. Maybe it was a bit underwhelming last year, but I think a lot of that was because of the offensive line. And I do blame a lot of that specifically on Freddie Kitchens. You also have Rashad Higgins, so I think should be a fine number 3. They drafted a 6th rounder. The wide receivers get a 10. Also, backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. That's the easiest 10 you'll ever have to make. And then for tight ends, Austin Hooper, I think is really good, but I also think that you have David Njoku, Harrison Bryant, some depth there. I'm giving this an 8. I really like the tight end grouping, so they get an 8 there. It's not top of the league, but it's still really good. 28 out of 30 total points for the weapons area, which brings their total offense, despite the fact that they have a number 3 for quarterback, the total offense still very impressive, 7.8. A lot of fun Baker Mayfield should have next year.
Yeah, I think, this skill position is just, everybody was hyped about this skill position group last year, and I think you should be even more hyped this year. Hunt's going to be back for the entire season, and I think he can be, it's impressive that they kept him around. I think he's going to be a terrific alternative to Nick Chubb. Lighten up some of the carries. Also, I think he's a terrific receiving back. You have guys like Beckham and Landry, and I think People-Jones is almost. I think he didn't pan out necessarily at Michigan like they were hoped, but he was a terrific high school recruit, and he's a terrific athlete. And I think he's going to make some things happen, whether it's at receiver or in the return game. I think he can be very good at that as well. I think Hooper is obviously terrific. And, Njoku's still on the team now. I think there were some questions if he's going to be on the team at the beginning of the year. But 2018, I thought he was really building towards being a really good tight end. And then he got hurt last year. I think he can still be a pretty good tight end. And I think if he's a number 2 guy, I think that's a terrific thing to have.
Yeah, especially with he's been at times an abysmal blocker, so getting him a number 2 guy where he can just sort of be the receiving tight end could be some real value. So move on to the edge rush or the defense. We'll start with edge rushers. Myles Garrett, again, another one of those guys, could be across from a tomato can. He's getting a 10, but they have Olivier Vernon, who is really good as well. So easy 10 here, I think, for the edge. And then for interior defensive line, you have Larry and whatever. He's very good, though. You have Sheldon Richardson, very good run defender. They also drafted a 3rd rounder for the interior defensive line. I like the interior D-line. I really like the edge rushers, but I like the interior D-line as well. I'm giving them an 8, so 18 out of 20 total points for the defensive line. Good D-line for Cleveland.
Yeah, that interior defensive line, I think, is almost underrated. It's very good. I think I'm going to take a shot at it. Ogunjobi is actually very, very good, and I think him and Richardson are a great pairing. Mm-hmm. So is Garrett Defensive Player of the Year this year?
I mean, he had it last year, and then he hit a quarterback with his own helmet. I think that he had. I mean, the thing about Garrett is that I think a lot of people this isn't just a one-time thing. The helmet hitting thing. He led the league in personal fouls up until that moment. I think he still led it overall last year. He punched Delaney Walker in the head one game. He should have been ejected for it. He's the definition of the kind of guy where it's like he just needs to keep his cool because he's so talented. And so I hope he will. We'll just, until he gets suspended for another season, I guess we'll just assume that he will be able to keep his cool. He's so good. He's so strong. One of my favorite edge rushers to watch. And yeah, I mean, I think that he's got to be the favorite.
Yeah, I was looking at some odds before the offseason. They had Jadeveon, or in like June, I was looking at this article from June had Jadeveon Clowney as better odds than him for Defensive Player of the Year. I was thinking it was probably because he wasn't reinstated, but Clowney wasn't even on a roster and still isn't on a roster. I think Garrett is a great pick for Defensive Player of the Year this year. I think he's terrific, like you said. And yeah, he probably could have won it last year if he stayed on the field. If he didn't smash somebody with his own helmet. So we'll see. I think that he's terrific. I think he is going to win one once in his career if he just manages to keep his cool, which I think he will at one point for a full season. And I think it could be this year.
Yeah. And we'll finish off the defense now, starting with linebackers. Linebackers, good amount to talk about. You have Mack Wilson, who I thought, there's the car in the background for a second. I think Mack Wilson, he's a good player. I think excuse me, I lost my train of thought. I thought he was going to be a good player heading into. He was a 5th-round pick. He had some rough moments last year, but he also had some splash plays. So we'll see if he can sort of fix up the rough patches so he can have those splash plays while still not being a liability on the field when he's not getting splash plays. You have Sion Takaki, who was a 3rd-rounder in 2019, and he had a decent rookie year, so I'll be interested to see what he does in his 2nd year. You also have B.J. Goodson, who's kind of nothing special, good and run, bad in coverage type of guy, and they drafted Phillips in the 3rd round here. So a lot of question marks here in the linebacking group. Probably the biggest, other than Baker Mayfield, probably the most up in the air position grouping. So I'm going to give them a 4 because they have some potential, but they also have potential to be very bad. They have a good amount of guys who could be good, but again, I can't justify giving it more than a 4. Also for secondary, Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams, I like a lot. Williams kind of fell in the draft, but I thought that he proved he probably should have gone earlier with his rookie season. Carl Joseph, he's solid. He's from Oakland. I like that move to get him. And then they drafted Grant Delpit with the 2nd round. So I'm going to give the secondary an 8. Linebackers a 4. This gives their overall defense 7.6, which brings their total team to a 7.2.
Yeah, I think that this is a team that's probably going to grade out pretty well besides quarterback. The linebackers are the biggest question for me. I even have more questions about them than Baker Mayfield, I think. I think losing a guy like Joe Sherbert's tough because he was such a good linebacker for a lot of years for them. The secondary is interesting. You mentioned how they essentially stole Greedy Williams probably later than he probably should have been picked. They're doubling down on the LSU guys to do that again. I thought Grant Delpit was almost unfairly drafted way too low. I thought that he was for sure going to be a first round guy. He's had so much talent, I think, at the safety position, and I think he was carrying a lot of injuries throughout the year for LSU. Plus, LSU changed so much on offense that the pace of play just changed drastically, and it's really tough for defenses to be good when the pace of play is at the pace that LSU, Oklahoma play at. I think he's going to be really good. And I think getting him in the second round pick, I believe, right? Yeah, second round, number 44, is a complete steal. I think he's going to be a really good safety for them as well.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so for the Browns, that's where they end up. I do think that, again, I usually hate the analysis of like it all depends on the quarterback, but I think this is one of those teams where it is kind of true, where I feel like this team can go as far as Baker Mayfield can take them. I think this should be very interesting to watch. Their overall team ends up being tied for 8th with the Minnesota Vikings with a 7.2. This surpasses Denver, who had a 7.0 as the highest team that finished 3rd in their division in total in terms of overall points. Because the Broncos were the previous team that finished 3rd in their division with 7.0. Cleveland passes them. They are 3rd in the division still, but they're definitely a playoff contender for sure.
Yeah, I think that this team is going to be, the other thing is too, is that, we're essentially asking them to improve by 3 wins. For everything that looked like a disaster, they went 6-10 last year. So I think that this team can definitely improve by 3 wins with better offensive line play and a more qualified head coach. Now, we'll see with Stefanski. I just think that the offense is going to be very good under him because of what I saw in Minnesota last year. And, I can't beat this enough. I think that he's going to pound Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, especially with what he did with Dalvin Cook last year. I think that this offense can be really good if it's run through those running backs. And if Baker's coming out of play action, he has guys one-on-one with Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and Austin Hooper. I think he's good enough quarterback to make those throws.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I was going to say, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, it should be interesting. I do think, though, the worst thing going for Cleveland is the top 2 teams in their division, 2 very good teams. Let's start with your team for number 2, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Never my team, but they're here. So Pittsburgh comes in at number 2. I think that this is a very good team that's going to bounce back. Ben Roethlisberger gets healthy. I don't think he's going to lead the league in passing yards this year, but I also don't think he's going to fall off the cliff this year. I think he's going to be solid. I think that they have a lot of guys coming back that are going to be healthy and good. I think this is going to be a good team. They showed last year that they could be very good, that they were really good defensively. Mike Tomlin really showed that he could be a very good head coach, despite having so many quarterback issues. And I'm willing to paint all of last year's failures to essentially having quarterback issues. So if that's problem solved and Ben is back healthy and plays the majority of the season, then there's no reason that this team couldn't win 10 games.
Yeah. No, I think I think their ceiling is a lot higher than 10 games as well. I think they have a very high ceiling. Let's start at the top. You have Mike Tomlin. I'm giving him a 10. I had him as my number 2 coach. I'm very high on Tomlin. I think he's fantastic. Ben Roethlisberger gets a 5 because and I think that feels right. He's totally up in the air. One of the, we called Baker Mayfield a huge wild card. He's another one of those huge wild cards heading into 2020. We'll have to see if he can return. I think he will. And I think that could be very good for them. You already touched on kind of that. So I'll go to the offensive line. I think the weak spot is probably Marquise Pouncey, he's 31. And to be honest, I think it's fair to say he might be past his prime. He probably had his worst year last year. Obviously, has had fantastic years for Pittsburgh, but I am a bit concerned about him currently. But that being said, I think that the rest of their line is very good. You have DeCastro and Wazinski, who are both great, especially in run for the guards and for their tackles. They have Alejandro Villanueva and then Matt Feeler, who are both great, especially in pass. So you kind of have that, their tackles can pass block really well and can still run block. Their guards can run block really well and can still pass block. And even if Pouncey is washed up, which I'm not going to say he's washed up. I just think he might not be what he once was. He's a center, and he can, as long as he can just be fine. I feel very confident about this offensive line. I'm going to give the offensive line a 9.
Yeah, I think that this is a very good group. A lot of good offensive line groups, I think, in this division, obviously, besides Cincinnati. I think that they're going to be very good again. The biggest question with Ben is he's always been a guy who's not afraid to take hits. And I think that's a big thing is he going to be able to release the ball and not take hits, because he is a guy who's struggled to last entire seasons. And I think that's going to be a big thing for him. I like this offensive line, though, overall. I think Matt Feeler is probably the best Bloomsburg player ever. I'm willing to go on a limb and say he's the best player to ever come out of Bloomsburg College or University, wherever that is.
Well, my Bloomsburg College power rankings video coming out tomorrow will prove you way wrong. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say he's the best player ever to come out of Bloomsburg, which is impressive. I think that this is a really good group overall, though.
Yeah, I agree. And for the weapons, we'll go wide receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster. You have Chase Claypool, James Washington, who had 735 yards in his second year last year. You also have Deontay Johnson, who could be a breakout guy. A lot of people are predicting him to potentially be a breakout guy next year. He was good as a rookie last year. But again, to me, this wide receiving group, it's all potential right now. And with the exception of Juju, there's not a lot of proven guys. And I still don't know if Juju is someone who can consistently win one-on-one matchups. I think I have some concerns about this receiving core, so I'm only going to give it a 6.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, there's questions if Juju can be a number one guy. And that was the big thing. I don't think it was wrong of Antonio Brown to say stuff about him at the end of that season, because he hasn't proven himself as a number one guy yet. Obviously, he struggled through some injuries, but I think as a whole, and, when you're playing with Mason Rudolph and a guy named Duck throwing you the football, it's going to be a problem. But I do think that he regressed last year. If there's one thing that I have that I'm going to say about Pittsburgh and why I'm not necessarily worried about wide receivers is because they've consistently just go back through the years, developed so much wide receivers throughout the years that I think all of these guys could end up really good. Just because this is a team that's always developed wide receivers. And so that's where I'm not worried about them. At the same time, you have questions overall, but I do think that these guys can be pretty good.
Yeah, there's a few like that. Like a Kansas City with running backs. Like there's a couple that they just seem to touch gold when they pick up someone. Let's talk about running backs for Pittsburgh. I'm a bit concerned. I'm not sure how much faith I have in James Conner. And again, there's so many good running backs out here that even if you have a good one, your score probably isn't going to be as good as it might feel like it should be. You have Benny Snell, who I like, Kentucky guy. I liked him out of college. But again, 3.9 yards per carry. I thought he was fine last year. I think that he's kind of probably just a number 2 guy. They also drafted some McFarland in the 4th round. So I'm going to give the backs a 4. Again, bit of a question mark for me. I want to see James Conner with Ben Roethlisberger again. I know they played together that 1 year. Not sure how much. I think he's good, but I'm still going to give this a 4. And then because I also think that with the offensive line, you should be getting good numbers with that. And then for tight ends, I like the tight end grouping of Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald. I'm giving the tight ends a 9. So 4 for backs, 9 for tight ends.
Yeah, I think that Ebron's a great get for them. Obviously, he only played 11 games last year, but he's always been a very good receiving tight end. And I think that could be a pretty good group in the tight end group. Connor's the interesting one. I feel like everybody, if we did this last year, I feel like everybody was ready to give Connor a 10 after his performance last year, but he still hasn't hit 1,000 yards for his career. I'm willing to say that a lot of last season's struggles had up until he got hurt too. He was another, that was all the big theme for Pittsburgh's offenses up until they got hurt. There was this. I'm willing to put a lot of his struggles to essentially defenses daring Mason Rudolph and good old Duck to beat them, and essentially saying we're just not going to let James Conner go nuts. So he could have a big bounce back year, but I want to see it before I'm ready to say that he's really good. I can agree with all that with Conner. I do think he's going to be fine, though. This is another group that I think, by the end of the season, I could see the running backs being very good.
Yeah. And I think, a 4 in this category means you can still run the ball, I think. So, not a disaster. It gives their offense a 6.6, a bit low, but they more than make up for it through the rest here. Where first we'll do the defensive line. You could argue this is up there with the best defensive lines in football. You have T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree. T.J. Watt was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate last year. Bud Dupree, a very good number 2 guy. They even drafted an edge guy in the 3rd round of Highsmith, which, typically that tells you that they really liked him, even though it's a position that they don't need. For the interior defensive line, I do think that losing Hargrave hurts, but I don't think it hurts them that badly. I think Dan McCullers, who probably will replace him, is probably the weak spot, but he's still fine. He's still pretty good. And then you have Stephon Tuitt and Cameron Hayward. So that I'm going to give the interior defensive line a 9 to pair with 10 for the edge, which gives them a 19 out of 20 for the defensive line. Very good D-line.
So we didn't talk about it before. Did you do player rankings for this division? Because we did. I was going
to, and then I forgot. But you go ahead and for the last one next week, I'll make sure I do it. Get one.
Yeah.
Done.
So is it fair to say that Myles Garrett probably has the higher ceiling, but T.J. Watt's the best player in the division?
I think I like Myles Garrett better now. I think Myles Garrett's the better player now. I think that T.J. Watt is so explosive, but I think that there's more ways Myles Garrett can beat you right now as opposed to Watt. That's why, and I think that I also think that if there are some again, we're definitely splitting hairs with these two great talents. Yeah. There are some slight problems that you can get with Watt where he goes to the inside too much. It can give up. It can give up some things. I think that Garrett is the better run defender. I think Garrett's the better player.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm almost ready to go 1A, 1B, 1C because we haven't even talked about Lamar Jackson, who'll be on the next team, by the way. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, Lamar Jackson plays for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, splitting hairs with these ones, I guess, if you look at mentality too, I might put Watt ahead of Garrett. I think he's that good of a rusher, and also he doesn't carry the baggage of, is he going to play the whole season or is he going to get suspended? But yeah, I mean, this defense was terrific last season, and I think it was led by Watt and the guys up front that were very good. This was a terrific group.
So let me be clear. Myles Garrett, your favorite for Defensive Player of the Year, but J.J. Watt's better. Or T.J. Watt, excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense.
So let me justify myself here. I guess I'll put it this way. I think that Myles Garrett can win Defensive Player of the Year if he plays 16 games. Am I betting that he's going to play 16 games? No.
I see.
And if he doesn't play 16 games, I'm willing to say TJ Watt is going to be a more impactful player this season.
I see. So your sort of thought is like in the next 10 years, it seems likely that Garrett will have another instance or two where he does something stupid, whereas TJ Watt has never really done that. So he'll add more value over 10 years, even though for one specific game, Garrett might be the better player.
Yes. I can even say throughout an entire 16-game season that I feel like, because I feel like Watt's going to be there 16 games. Like I feel like Garrett could play 12 games, but be monster in those 12 games. To where I don't think, if he doesn't play 12 games, he's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year, obviously. So, but he's going to be a better player, I think.
I think that's fair. We'll finish off the defense now for Pittsburgh. You have Devin Bush and Vince Williams. I love Devin Bush. He had a great rookie year. And Vince Williams is very good. And they only need 2 linebackers because they play 3-4. So they're, or from 2 middle linebackers. So they're getting an 8 here for linebackers, I think. And for secondary, I really like Joe Hayden. I think Steven Nelson is underrated. I think he's a number 1 guy. I think he's a good number 1 corner. I think that you also have Terrell Edmonds, who is probably their worst secondary player. But that being said, I think he's still solid. I just think that they have a really good secondary. And to finish things off, kind of what completed their defense last year was trading for Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was fantastic. I like the secondary a lot. I think it's really good. I'm giving it a 10. So that puts their defense all the way up to a 9.3, the best side of a team out of any of the teams we've talked about so far by a good margin. The next closest is Tampa Bay, who had a defense of 8.8. This brings Pittsburgh's overall team to 8.0, which puts them here, 1 second. I believe it puts them in 3rd place. So currently the 3rd best team due to their great defense. I don't think they're going to be the 3rd best team in football, but they're so complete as a team, and they have a great defense, which can really potentially propel them to great things if their offense can improve, which I think it will with Ben Roethlisberger.
So who's second and first right now?
Let me check. I will. So the Saints were number 1, and the Chiefs are number 2. Saints have 8.5, Chiefs 8.2, Steelers 8.0, and I'll do Bucks 7.8, and 49ers are the 5th with 7.7.
Okay, I was curious where the Bucks were in comparison to them. But yeah, I think this defense is terrific. You mentioned all those guys. Is Devin Bush your favorite non-Buccaneer player?
No, Lamar Jackson. Or not Lamar, Joe Flacco.
Well, besides the eliteness of Joe Flacco is
I don't think so. I mean, I liked him a lot. I liked his game a lot, but I wouldn't say I don't love him that much. I mean, favorite non, maybe Ryan. Can I do former Bucks with like Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Sure.
Yeah, I think he might be the guy.
I mean, I do think Bush is terrific. I think that linebacking group's really good. And then, of course, having a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick at the back proved how much it changed everything. You question sometimes trading first-round picks. And the big thing with the Steelers with trading that first-round pick at the time was it looked like it was going to be a top 10 pick. But a guy like Fitzpatrick is just so elite back there that it changed everything. And it turned this defense from almost, I would say, great to elite, which is crazy to say. But yeah, I think he's that good and made that much of an impact for them, which is going to be the same thing this next season. It's going to be one of the best, as the grades show, it's going to be one of the best defenses in football. The question for the Steelers this next season, I think, is health on both sides of the ball and how many games are you getting out of Ben Roethlisberger, which I think changes a lot.
Yeah, I almost even subtracted a point in their quarterback room because of their backup quarterback position. I decided Myles Garrett is just good enough to not Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph got that helmet thing in my head. I think Rudolph is just good enough to avoid not losing a point, but he's not very good. He's not someone, there's a clear drop off there. They need Big Ben healthy. But let's just go into the team led by a quarterback who people always keep wondering if he's going to stay healthy, despite the fact that he hasn't missed a game yet. The Baltimore Ravens, of course, as your number 1 team. Why do you feel like the Ravens are going to win this division?
Well, they were 14-2 last year, so there was that. And they're a pretty good team overall, I'd say. I think that, another one of these really complete teams that I think is going to grade out really highly. Obviously, they have the reigning MVP, which helps a lot. They have a couple of minor questions I think I have throughout their roster, but they've continued. I think they've actually improved this offseason. They have a lot of really good players, I think, overall. It's not hard to pick the Ravens number 1 here. I think that they can easily repeat as the number 1 seed in the division or even in the NFL.
Yeah, I think so as well. And really, it all starts up top. John Harbaugh getting a 9 here, and Lamar Jackson, he gets a 10. Again, tied for the second best. Obviously, the only team that got 20 out of 20 on those were Kansas City. But I mean, Lamar was fantastic last year, won unanimous MVP, and Harbaugh won Coach of the Year. Pretty good awards for them coming off of last year, although obviously the postseason was kind of a rough spot.
Yeah, I mean, this is a no-brainer. 19 out of 20 makes sense. This is a really good group. It seems crazy that there was a potential that John Harbaugh was on the verge of losing his job before turning over to Lamar. But yeah, I think that this is a really good group. Lamar, listen, he was MVP last year, led the league in touchdown passes. I hope the joke that the greatest receiver to ever play quarterback never dies, because I always laugh.
Yeah.
But, I still think that some of the concerns about him until he wins a playoff game are going to unfortunately be true. Well, maybe not necessarily be true, but they're going to stick with him until he proves that he can win in the postseason. I think that Lamar and that offense is kind of the situation which I've talked about before, which if everything goes according to the plan, the Ravens look really good and they are a really good football team. But if things go wrong and this team's all of a sudden down 10 or down 14, it's a very difficult thing ask the Ravens to come back because they stick to their game plan, and asking Lamar to throw 50, 60 times a game is really tough. And I feel like it's almost evidenced by his 1 fourth quarter comeback in 2 seasons combined. Obviously, he didn't play his whole rookie season, but 1 fourth quarter comeback in his 2 seasons, plus obviously 0 in the playoffs because he hasn't won a playoff game. We'll see. I mean, I think that he is going to win a Super Bowl in his lifetime. I think this team's good enough to win a Super Bowl that I'm not too worried about it. But it's still a question that I'm going to have until he essentially just does it. If he does end up winning a game that they fall behind in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have countered that by saying that well, it's hard to get too many fourth quarter comebacks when you're
Well, yeah.
blowing almost every team out and you're never trailing in the fourth quarter. But let's just go on to the offensive line. You have Matt Suckra, who is good, but is coming off an ACL, MCL, and PCL tears, along with a dislocated kneecap. Minor injuries, but he should be fine for next year. You also have for guards, you have Bradley Bozeman, who was the weak link in 2019, but he wasn't like a mess. He was just kind of the weak link in the good offensive line. They brought in DJ Fluker from Seattle, who's a really good run blocking guard that should help them out because given the fact they like to run the ball here and there. And then for their tackles, this is really where they'd make their money in terms of their offensive line with Ronnie Staley, who is elite. He belongs in that top player conversation, I think. And then you have Orlando Brown Jr., again, son of Zeus. I think he's not quite elite, but I think he's still very good. So he's going to be getting an 8 here, or their offensive line gets an 8 here. Again, largely due to their great tackles. And I think that, one wink link and the question marks of Suckra coming off his injuries. But as a whole, I think this is still a very good offensive line.
Yeah, I honestly think that this is one of my questions, I guess, about this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think having him come back is actually a big thing because I feel like this interior offensive line, if he was still injured to start the season, could be a big problem, especially losing Marshall Yanda last season. Obviously he retired in the offseason, but obviously with him back, all points to saying he's healthy. I don't know how he's coming back 9 months after that injury, but all signs point to him being healthy, which I guess I'm willing to say is going to be fine. But I feel like if he was out, that would be a big problem because losing Yanda, but I'm not overly worried about the team overall. I still think that they're going to be very good on the offensive line. And I think they're going to be just fine blocking for Jackson.
Yeah, and I also think it's easier to block when you're an interior offensive lineman in this system. I think that the tackles kind of have the more difficult job, and they have guys who can block in this system well. We'll move on to the wide receivers. This is the weak spot of this team. I also think it's not as important as it is in most teams, but that doesn't factor in. They have Marquise Brown, who he definitely had some flashes, but you'd like to see him be a bit more consistent in year 2. Willie Snead and Miles Boykin. I'm not really sure if either of those guys are even a number 2 guy right now. They also did draft a player in the 3rd round and 6th round in this draft. I'm going to give this receiving group a 3. But that being said, like I mentioned, it's not that important. And to have guys who can do what they need them to do for this system. However, I do think it's fair to say that, if I don't factor in the system into it, this is definitely the weakest position grouping that they have.
Yeah, this is my other question about this team. I do feel like that I don't think Marquise Brown's a number 1 receiver. He just, watching what I saw of him last year, he had 550 yards last year and 147 that came against Miami in week 1.
He had a couple of moments though. I mean, he was very hit. At times he looked very good though. I think that he was and I think he was banged up at a certain point as well. But yeah, but you are right. I mean, he definitely I think gets a bit more credit because of his great week 1 performance.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too. Even if we just redrafted the wide receivers in that draft class, I'm willing to bet he goes 4th because I'd probably take AJ Brown, then Deebo Samuel, and you could probably talk me into DK Metcalf over him. So I'm willing to say he goes 4th, and I think even a guy like N'Keal Harry is unproven because he missed training camp in the first half of the year, which I think is a big thing for wide receivers. So I'm just not ready to say he's going to be a number 1 guy. I don't think he's ever going to be a number 1 guy, but this offense was just fine with him being a number 1 guy last year, and a lot of that too has to do with a really good pass catching tight end who we're going to talk about here, who I think is really underrated. So it's a concern, but the offense proved it was just fine without it.
Wow. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, never going to be a number 1 guy. Putting your stamp on it. I looked that up. 641 snaps. So he missed some time. He still had played usually about 1,000 snaps his starter. So he definitely wasn't out there a ton. I mean, I think it's fair to bet against him at this point, but I still think he has potential. I like him as a number 2 guy. I'll move on to the
Antonio Brown on this team in week 10?
No.
Week 9? No?
For one thing, he's suspended for half the year, so I don't know why you're going to pick him up over halfway through the season, right? Wasn't it eight games?
Well, if you pick him up now, is he play? Is he on? Is he on the
I
sideline
see.
week 10?
And no one's picking up Antonio Brown. I don't think so. I'll bet you $1. No one picks up Antonio Brown.
I'm willing to bet he's on the Ravens. You know.
Okay, I'll bet. Okay, so if he ends up on the Ravens, I owe you a dollar. If he doesn't, you owe me $1.
Yes.
Okay, this seems like a pretty good bet for me. But then again, you have this weird voodoo magic where you'll say weird stuff like this and then it comes true. So there's probably is going to happen. But yeah. Anyways, but again, I don't think they need a receiver. Like I think that like the only reason. Anyways, we'll just get into the backs. You have Mark Ingram, who is a bit older, but you also have J.K. Dobbins, who they drafted, who I loved out of the draft. They still have Gus Edwards, who has looked very good in this system as well. I want to give the backs an 8 here. Again, some question marks with Dobbins being a rookie and Ingram being a bit up there in age, but I still think they're good enough, and I think that one of those would probably work out, you have to assume, and probably both of them will. For tight ends, you have Mark Andrews, who is elite. You have Nick Boyle, who is still a good run blocker who can catch, which works for this system. Tight end groups gets a 10. Mark Andrews, top 5. I think I might have him as number 3, to be honest, just behind Kelsey and 49ers guy.
Kittle.
Help me out.
Great one. Paid. We've been
Kittle, yeah. We've been podcasting for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going crazy. Yeah, I think Mark Andrews might be number 3. I mean, you could put Ertz there, but Andrews is more complete, I think. So I'm going to give this a 10. Gives their offense as a whole a 7.8.
Yeah, the Mark Ingram's been really interesting. Essentially, not a lot of guys get their 1,000-yard season in years 6 through 9. That's 69 for everybody following at home. But yeah, year 6 through 9, he hits 1,000 yards in 3 of those 4 seasons. We both really like J.K. Dobbins, especially in this thing. I felt like, there was 4 running backs that a lot of people talked about. I felt like a lot of it was scheme fit for me. I felt like Clyde Edwards-Helaire made a lot of sense for what Kansas City looks to do. And I feel like J.K. Dobbins makes a lot of sense. That Ohio State offense has a lot of resemblances to what they try to do in Baltimore, I think. And I think that this is going to be a perfect fit. I think that he's eventually going to take over the starting role this season. I think I think Ingram's still going to be a great between the tackles guy, but I think Dobbins can be elite. And I think he's going to fit into this team seamlessly. And, if anyone isn't, keying in on Mark Andrews for fantasy purposes because someone's going to overpay for Zach Ertz third, Mark Andrews is a great get. He's a terrific receiver, and Lamar Jackson loves using his tight ends too, so that also helps. But yeah, he was the leading receiver last year, and I expect him to be it again.
Yeah, really like this team. Again, really like this offense. It was the best offense in football last year. I think it has a lot of opportunities to be one of the best again this year. If you look at it in terms of points per drive. You also have I think the one weakness, the reason why it's only a 7.8 is because of that weak wide receiver room, which they don't need that much unless they are down multiple scores in the fourth quarter, which, we've talked to death about, that is a real concern, but I think it's a bit overblown. Let's move on to the defense. First, I think the defense is also another way where they're kind of built to play a certain style of football. And I think this time they've fixed those weaknesses that they had last year. And what I mean by that is we'll get into it. So first they have the edge rushers. You have Matthew Judon, who I think he's probably going to be their only real everyday or every snap, or at least most snaps, edge rusher going out there and playing. You'll probably have a rotation of Jalen Ferguson, Titus Bowser. You have Ward. I think those guys should be effective. I'm going to give the edge grouping a 7. I like Judon, and I think they can generate enough pressure with their rotation. You also have the interior D-line of Derek Wolfe, who I like a good amount from Denver, and then Brandon Williams, who I think is a really good run stopper. They also went out and added Calais Campbell, who I think is really good, and they drafted a player in the 3rd round. So I'm going to give this interior defensive line also a 7. And, we'll even stick with the linebackers for a second as well. We'll keep here. Linebackers, they drafted Patrick Queen in the 1st round. They also drafted Malik Harrison in the 3rd round. And they have LJ Fort, who's kind of nothing special, but sort of an all-around guy. So I'm going to give the linebackers a 5. I think they'll be good. I think Queen will be good. And I think that, again, it's a lot of potential, but I think it'll at least be mediocre. So 7, 7, and 5 for a spot that kind of this area was what cost them that playoff game against Tennessee last year. I think they've improved a lot their weaknesses.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't for DeAndre Hopkins getting traded, we'd all be talking about how stupid Jacksonville was for essentially letting Calais Campbell go for free.
Mhm.
This was one of the biggest steals of the offseason, and I think he's going to be terrific on this interior defensive line. I think this is going to be a really good group overall. Patrick Queen, I think, should have some, we keep talking about can anybody beat out Chase Young? I still feel like Willie Gay and even Patrick Queen have the chance to beat out a guy like Chase Young for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I'm not going to bet on it because Chase Young's that good, but I think Queen can have that sort of impact not only for his entire career, but right away, I think he can have an instant impact at that linebacker spot and compete for that trophy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And here's the thing about Baltimore. Here's clearly what they're trying to do. They want to, run a 3-4, blitz the hell out of you, and rely on their secondary. It's very similar to what you see New England do. They have very similar defenses, and I think that Baltimore's secondary is just as good. Baltimore's secondary might even be better. You can make the argument. They have a lot of really talented players in this secondary. You have Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, and Jimmy Smith. When Jimmy Smith is your third corner, this is a great cornerback room. You have Earl Thomas, who, again, he now can play in a system that's a cover one type of system. They play a lot of cover one and cover three, which obviously is what makes him so great. So he can sort of just play that typical free safety. You also have Chuck Clark, who's I think a very good strong safety. This is an easy 10 for me. It's probably them, Seattle, and New England are the top three secondaries in the NFL. So this gets a 10. Brings their defense to 7.3, brings their total to 7.7, which ties them with the team they beat in the Super Bowl not too long ago, San Francisco, for 7.7. That's tied for fifth. And again, I think that their score doesn't do them justice. I think that they are better than their score says, simply because they're okay with being weak in a couple of these areas so they can be stronger in the areas they think matter for their system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the secondary is very good. I think there are some other good secondaries out there that I could argue. I think, Los Angeles is up there as well as far as the Chargers. But this secondary is very good. They have a lot of talented players. I guess, Earl Thomas has been memeified this offseason because of that play against Derrick Henry, but he's still, I think, a very good free safety. I guess, if you're going to nitpick, the one question you have in the secondary, I feel like, is Marcus Peters throughout his career has proven that he can be kind of not just an erratic player, but an erratic human being. And if you're willing to bet on him for 16 games, I guess be my guess. That's the one concern, which is a minor concern, because he's proven multiple times that he can be a really elite cornerback. But I also feel like there's times where he doesn't seem into it, and he can be a head case in a locker room and necessarily kind of break up a lot of things that are good. But that's a very minor thing to complain about, because he's proven talent-wise that he's so good that sometimes it doesn't even matter. And, getting him last season was a big thing for the Ravens last year. That changed a lot, and I think he could have a very good year this next season. That's the one question I have for him, though.
Yeah, I mean, I have a different question about Marcus Peters. I'm not really concerned about. I mean, he threw a flag into the stands one time. I get it. He has had a couple of them, but I feel like I can only think, unless I'm forgetting something, that's the only time I can remember it actually affecting a game. I think the bigger question about Peters is that we've seen him when he goes up against top talent. Sometimes he does well, but oftentimes he can get burned and he tries to do too much. And usually he gets those interceptions and those pick sixes when he's against favorable matchups. But now you can put Marlon Humphrey on a number one guy. You can let him be the number two or even a number three sometimes, and just sort of focus on trying to, he can sort of focus on trying to make a big play, and he'll still be in a position where he can make a play, even if he doesn't end up making that, splash play, which is why I think he's played so well for Baltimore. And again, when Chuck Clark is your number five guy, when he's your weak link, I mean, this is and Earl Thomas is your number four guy. I think this is a pretty good secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Peters is going to be pretty good, but it's the same thing I kind of had with a guy like, when I talk about quarterbacks, like I talked about with Tyrod Taylor, where two teams were like, yeah, no thanks. Two teams almost essentially thought he was too much to have on their team, that they didn't want to keep him around. I guess that's the question you have. But like you said, he's playing behind Marlon Humphreys. He's not like, even if they lost Peters, this would still be one of the best secondaries in football. So it's not something that I'm overly worried about. So I still think that it's going to be an elite group.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of that is I don't think any team has used Peters like Baltimore has. So like I wasn't a huge Peters fan myself. I was when Baltimore traded for him, I was kind of like, I don't think this is a great move. And then but I sort of saw like, okay, they're like, we're not even gonna bother to have you on DeAndre Hopkins, even though actually he played pretty well against DeAndre Hopkins. But when we're playing the Falcons, don't worry about Julio Jones. Just stay away from him. You get someone that you think you can cover, so that way you can make those splash plays, which I like.
Still is the best
Go ahead.
ball skills among any cornerback I think in the league too. So I don't think that it necessarily matters. It's just the times where he's not making the play on the ball and misses completely. That's where he gets burned. But it doesn't matter because he can be the number 2, number 3 guy, like you said.
Yeah, agreed. So that is our rankings for AFC North. We only have one division left. That is going to be for your New England Patriots. And I think that should be a very fun one. We're going to end this series with that one. We're also going to, I think, I think we'll do like what MVP. We'll pick our MVPs as well in that podcast. We could do like offensive and defensive rookie of the year, maybe coach of the year, maybe some other fun stuff like that. Do a playoff prediction show, sort of do all that as well. Does that sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. I'm looking forward to talking about it. Not looking forward to breaking down the Patriots. I think it's been a rough off season, but yeah, we'll see. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, good teaser there. At least this time, it's not like when you said that the AFC South was boring and you don't want to talk about them next week and told everyone not to watch.
Hey man, I keep it real.
Yeah, and then I liked how I made a joke the next podcast, but a lot of people hadn't finished the end of that one, and so they got mad at me for calling the AFC South boring, even though it was me making fun of you for calling it boring. A lot of fun stuff.
I keep my snide comments unless it's for the Raiders at the end of the podcast. So
Yeah, smart, very good. That's how you avoided all those worst take of the weeks back when we were doing that.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, fun show. Any final thoughts before we end this one? Been a longer podcast.
Yeah, it has been long, but it has been fun to see. I think that was weird.
Yeah,
I think that this. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It does it again. A light show at the end of it for anybody
exactly
too.
So there you go. There you go. Stay till the end of these podcasts so you can see Kai. And also, we're reacting to it without actually saying anything, so anyone listening to the audio has no clue what's going on right now.
Yeah, exactly. But my lights are flickering for some reason. But yeah, I mean, I think this AFC North is going to be a fun division. I'm really excited to see the Browns. I can't stress enough how fun it's going to be to see this team, and I think Stefanski is going to put them in the postseason.
Yeah, how weird is it that we're saying this? Like 2 years ago, no one would say I'm really excited to see the Browns. Like that would be a joke, I mean, I do feel like it's like, listen, I know Cleveland has been tough the past year, but like think about where you were 3 years ago, where getting the first overall pick was just an every year occurrence. Things are looking up. Again, hopefully Baker works out. I want Cleveland to be successful. They deserve to have a good year.
Well, it's even funnier that even last year people were like, I'm really excited to see the Browns, and then people who actually watch football were snickering behind the scenes because it's like, have you seen their offensive line play? But, it's going to be interesting to see. I think that this is the team that was probably a year too early as far as their projections, and I think now are probably going to surprise some people because people were so high on them last year.
Yeah, I also like how now Cleveland, every time there's a team that gets hyped up in the offseason, now every team is the Cleveland Browns. I've heard about Tampa Bay. I've heard it about the Cardinals. I've heard it about the Raiders. I've heard about quite a decent amount of these teams. When you have a good offseason, you're going to be the Cleveland Browns because that's how that works.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how it is now.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, all right. Again, I think that does it for this one. Until next time, have a good one.
Peace.